Good afternoon. Dear listeners, welcome to AUGA Group meeting with investors. I'm Emilia from Nasdaq Vilnius and I'll be moderating today's event. We will start with a presentation from the management, which will be followed by the Q&A session. Please be informed that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for a rewatch. As always, I encourage every one of you to share your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit them either anonymously or with your name. With that said, I'm pleased to introduce today's presenter, Chief Financial Officer of the company, Mindaugas Ambrasas. Mr. Ambrasas, please, the floor is yours and good luck.
Emilia, thank you for the introduction and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, thank you for joining the webinar. As presented, my name is Mindaugas and I will try to give you a little bit more information about what AUGA Group were doing last year and what are our financial results and latest developments for the year. For the start, just a short reminder what the group is doing. And as there were no major changes in our activities last year, so maybe let's move to the overview or overall results of the group for the year 2022. And I would say there are several key outtakes from those general and main figures. So first of all, that I would say that the group had rebounded from very difficult year 2021. And as you can see from our presentation or from financial report we published a couple of days ago, so we improved, I would say, all key financial indicators. So in terms of revenue, gross profit, net profit or EBITDA, it was substantially better comparing to the last year. Though we have positive changes in our results, I still have to say that 2022 was quite challenging year, I think not only for AUGA Group, but for all the businesses because of all those geopolitical situation. We had positive effects in terms of our businesses because prices of bigger part of our products has increased substantially, but from other side, the cost side had increased substantially as well. And just as a fact, last year we spent more than 7 million euros more comparing year to year on cost, energy, on fuel cost and energy alone. So that was, positive development from one side, but it also had some negative sides as well. And because of that, at least some of our segments, they were really hurt from this situation. And for the last couple of years, the group really spends lots of time and resources, and we talked a lot about those technological developments we are currently doing. So for financial results of year 2022, still there is no impact on our financial results from those things we are doing. And I really believe, and I hope that next year, when we will be talking about our results for 2023, we will already be able to say that from all those things we were doing, finally we have some positive effect on our results and profitability as well. But as always, I would say let's go from segment to segment and discuss those segments in a little bit more details. And as always, we start from crop growing activities. So when we talk about crop growing activity, agricultural side, so usually there are no, I would say, significant changes in the last quarter of the year, because there are not so much agricultural activities going on in that quarter. But this year was a little bit different, just because of all those turbulences we had and substantial changes in cost side at least. So this year, however, we had a negative result in initial recognition of biological assets at fair value in the fourth quarter, as you can see from a graph in the presentation. And it happened generally for a few reasons. So first of all, we did an extensive review of costs at the end of the year, because some of the things we are doing, final figures are not clear till the end of the year. And then we still have to use some forecasts closing agricultural season at the end of the third quarter. So when we did those final calculations, at least in some areas, actual costs were higher comparing to the figures we forecasted and planned when we did the calculation at the end of the third quarter. And there were also some changes in allocation of costs for the season. So generally, more costs were allocated for 2022 season comparing to the next year. So this was one of the reasons. So this cost review was one of the factors which had this negative effect. And second was how we value harvest for the next season. So generally, if you remember our methodology, how it's done. So at every point of time, we calculate what could be the value and could be profitability of our existing harvest. So when we do this at the end of the year, this year, I think we were more conservative on our assumptions. And as you can see from the graph in the left side of the slide, this year we booked the lowest gain in the last 3 years. So generally, I would say from one side, we really want to be more conservative in our assumptions when we see how our assumptions were realized in the last couple of years. Secondly, of course, there are developments in the market which also changes our assumption, and that's why we also did this revaluation of next year's harvest, and this at the end also had this negative effect on gain of biological asset value. Despite that, this of course had some negative effect on overall result of agricultural activities, but still, if we look at overall figures for the year, it was substantial improvement comparing to the last to 2021. As you can see, gross profit for 2022 was more than 12 million euros, and we had almost 1 million euros of gross profit a year ago. To sum up our agricultural activities, I would say that in terms of crop growing activities, 2022, you could say it was average in terms of yields, because for some of the crops, the year was quite good, for example, beans. But for some of them, for example, summer crops, it wasn't really, or even it was below the average figures we had in our group. So at the end of the year, I would say that in total, if you need to value your yields, so it was an average year. But of course, high prices, commodity prices really helped to improve the result. But from another side, costs, there was a factor which really drove result lower. What I would say is a good development last year. So our sales activities, they also showed some improvement comparing not only to year 2021, but also 2020. As you can see, a result of sales of agricultural produce, there is 1.9 million euros loss last year, but it was an improvement comparing to the results for the last couple of years. From one side, everyone could argue that it was a little bit easier for our salespersons just because of a trend in the market and the prices were growing. So of course, it's easier to get better result. But I believe it's not only the trend. I think we are a little bit more transparent in those activities. We pay more attention in storing our harvest, so we have less write-offs. So this was also the reason why this result improved. And at the end of the day, as I said, we have a gross profit of more than 12 million euros from crop growing activities in 2022. At this point of the year, we also talk about situation with the harvest and the situation in the market for the next year, because I think this is also very important and it also affects the results in the future. So if we talk about crop growing in terms of area of crops, so there is no major changes in crop portfolio, but in total we have slightly more hectares for cash crops. So potential for revenues is a little bit larger because we will have less hectares used for forages. But in terms of winter and summer crops, situation I would say is very similar to the last couple of years. It's very difficult now to talk about situation with the harvest because as you can see, at least in Lithuania, in Vilnius, there is snow outside, so it's difficult to really make a judgment about what is the situation of our crops currently. But if we look at our preparation works, so sowing process went really well. In general, this mild winter shouldn't have a negative effect on situation of crops as well. So I would say at this point of time, there are no threats that we should have to do resowing in spring or the crops could be somehow damaged. So situation is I would say, quite good at the moment. But I think much more challenging situation is in terms of pricing for commodities, and here it's quite difficult to predict how situation will continue this year, because as always we're using the same graph, organic and conventional wheat price in Germany, and I think you all know latest developments that yes, for year 2022 we had quite substantial increase in prices for all commodities, not only conventional but organic as well. But in 2023 the trend is changing, and for the last couple of months we see that prices are slightly decreasing. But I would say that at least organic market, there are still lots of uncertainties. So I mean that yes, there is a pressure to decrease the prices, but though we have quite a lot of negotiations, there are still quite a small number of actual agreements in the market. I'm not talking about AUGA Group only, but the market in general. So I think all market participants, they are trying to understand how the market will continue in the future and how situations will change in the future. Because if even you look at the graph, the highest prices we had last year, we had when we were selling remaining part of last season's harvest, so first half of the year, and then prices after the new harvest was harvested, they were a little bit lower. So I think now to talk about prices for remaining part of last year harvest, it's one thing, but how the situation will be when the new harvest and what quality new harvest, what amount of new harvest will be, it's very difficult to predict. So here I would say currently we are starting to work with the first agreements for the next year, but situation, as I said, it's lots of uncertainties, and I think it could change. Prices could go a little bit lower as well, but there are also arguments, and we believe that definitely the prices will not go on the level we had a couple of years ago, because there are lots of reasons. Pressure from the cost side as one, which will keep at least some level of prices intact. Dairy segment, if we talk about this segment, I think situation is a little bit more easy because really it's the same situation we were talking about for the last, I think, 4 quarters. So generally, we are really pleased with our results for the year in 2022. And as it was already mentioned a couple of times during our presentations, that yes, we had some challenges in production, but high prices of raw milk was, I would say, really important factor helping to improve results in dairy segment. And as you can see from the slide, that milk price grew by 28% for full year, and at the same time cost increased by 13% only, and this led that gross profit improved substantially for the segment from almost 1 million euros a year ago to 2.6 million euros last year. But it really becomes more tricky to talk about our expectations for the segment for 2023. I already mentioned, and we talked about this a couple of times in our previous presentations, that in 2022 we had this drop in our yields, and the reason was very poor harvest in previous season, so we generally had to change our feed structure. And we mentioned a couple of times that with the new harvest we expect our yields to rebound, and that's what actually happened, as you can see from the graph, that in the last few months of the year, with new harvest used in the feed of cows, so generally we already in a level of 2021 in terms of yields. So here I would say we have some positive developments. But if we talk about prices for raw milk, so here very similar situation to crop growing. So generally we have really quite a few questions how the situation will continue, because same situation with the crops, that for the last couple of months there is quite substantial drop in terms of prices, raw milk prices, and this of course will have a negative effect on our results for 2023. It's very difficult to predict what could be the final result, because I would say that it's still unclear what could be pricing level for milk for this year, because it's still quite fluctuating. We had some drop in the first 2 months. We could see some small rebound in the third, but still we can't use conventional prices because in terms of organic prices, our increase of prices, as you can see from the graph, was lower, but we also expect that maybe this negative development also will take time and will be as substantial as in the conventional market. So at the end, I would say that yes, changes in organic milk prices or milk prices definitely is a challenge for us, and I believe that it would be extremely difficult for us to reach results we had last year. One of the areas where we could see upside and maybe compensation of those decreasing prices, so as already mentioned, yields, we generally already picked up and increased the level of yields and reached yields of 2021. So hopefully this will continue, and this will be an upside comparing our results for next year with our historical results for 2022. Mushroom growing, really, I would say there is not much to talk about annual results because really, really bad. Sorry. And as you can see from presentation, or as you can see from reports, we had a gross loss of 1.4 million euros from mushroom segment in 2022. And it was already described a couple of times during our previous presentations that what was the reason of those worsening results of the segment. So first of all, last year we had very substantial increase of costs in the mushroom growing segment. I believe this was the segment which was really hurt the most in terms of business segment from those increases in energy prices, because it was increase of almost 65% or 2.3 million euros comparing our costs year to year. And we are using quite a lot of, for example, electricity, because we need to keep humidity and temperature in the facilities where mushrooms are growing. So generally, we need to do a lot of cooling during the summer period. And the third quarter, when we had the highest energy prices, there is the highest demand from our side for energy consumption. So that's why, if you remember, the third quarter was really bad in terms of financial results. Secondly, yes, there is a process going on when we are increasing the prices of our products in the retail market, but it really took some time. If we just check overall increase through the year, so it was, it was delayed, and the effect from increased price came later, and that's why this result was worse than it could be if the changes in pricing were executed a little bit earlier. And the third factor, and this problem really continues for some time already, that I would say our production capacity is not fully used. And we had several reasons in the last couple of years why our production volume was not optimal. Now, in the beginning, we had some challenges related to COVID. We had some challenges related to high temperature, and some of those problems they continued last year as well. But I think the new reason and the new argument was that the very high energy prices, we also had to change our production processes a little bit in order to save energy. Unfortunately, this also had an effect on our production volumes. So at the end of the year, as I said, this resulted in some negative results for the year for the segment. But not to end with this very negative note, I would say that we are quite or maybe we see a light in a tunnel for this segment already, because if just to check financial reports, so in the last quarter alone of the last year, we already made a gross profit, and this situation continues in the first month of 2023. So generally what happened and why we see that the results are finally improving in the crop growing segment. So first of all, this largest driver last year, energy costs, they decreased, and I would say they are stabilized already. We have some schemes for support compensation. Generally, market situation is much better. So generally, current energy price level is not hurting as much as it hurt us last year. Secondly, and I think this is maybe the most important factor, is that though, as I said earlier, this price increase was delayed, but slightly and stably we were increasing prices. And if we compare prices in the first quarter and in the fourth quarter last year, so we have a 16% increase. And this was one of the key reasons why we really see improvement in the financial results for the segment. And in terms of production volumes, as you can see from the graph, yes, we still not in the optimal production situation. And I think this is the largest upside for the segment and for AUGA Group for further improvement of results. And if we would be able to reach this optimal production volume of 1,000 tons per month, we would be really on the same historical level of profitability the company were operating for many, many years. So I think that, first few steps are already done and first few problems are already solved. And as I said, the results in the last quarter last year and the results in the beginning of this year, they really give some optimism moving further. FMCG, if you remember our presentation for about 6 months results, so I was talking that we are somehow pessimistic about results of the segment because the growth was what we planned wasn't reached. But second half of the year really changed the situation. And as you can see from the graph, we had extremely good third quarter in terms of sales, and we had almost the same level of sales in the fourth quarter as well. So the second half of the year really catched up what was not achieved maybe in the first half of the year. And if we look at the final results of the segment for 2022, I would say that we are quite happy with increase of sales by almost 31%. Yes, our expectation was to increase profitability more as well, but there are several reasons why this was not achieved in 2022. So the same situation as with mushrooms, it takes time to change prices, and the cost increase was quite rapid. So that's one of the reasons. Secondly, we are planning, we already launched some new products. So of course, this preparation had some additional costs, which also maybe decreased our profitability in 2022 a little bit, but it also gives us potential for further improvement, not only in terms of sales, but in profitability as well in 2023. And just as an example, so we really introducing a new product category, ready-to-eat grain and curry bowls, which you already can find in our key export markets, USA, Germany, Poland, and I think in the Baltic countries in nearest future as well. And maybe this was also missed. I think very good achievement for our FMCG business was that starting from second half of the last year, our growth of sales, or our sales in Germany increased substantially, and I believe now Germany is the second largest export market in our FMCG segment, because that was always a goal of ours to find the niche in EU markets, and it was somehow always a little bit more difficult. We were much more successful reaching US market, other countries. But now I would say we all finally have substantial sales in major EU market, that is Germany. So this is also quite a good achievement in FMCG segment. And as always, just to sum up those developments we had for the year, so where the biggest changes in terms of EBITDA came. So it's obvious, I think, from the presentation that we had a really positive development in agriculture and dairy, and mushrooms was the segment which really was hurt and then had a negative impact on our changes of EBITDA comparing year to year. However, it's related mainly to our OPEX expenditure. So this was also one of the areas which required review, and where costs had to increase just because of overall situation. So this was also one of the drivers for decreasing EBITDA level for the year. In every presentation for the last, I believe, couple of years, we give investors an update on our technological development. So I think this is the first time when I can say that at least some of the projects were already finalized. So I think, and I hope that you had the possibility to participate or to watch introduction of first tractors which were produced, and this project, the first batch of 3 tractors was completed, and the tractor was presented in February this year. We have slight delay with other projects just because of logistical issues, constructional processes, etc. But we still have a plan that the first biomethane production facility will be fully operational from the April this year. And as if you remember, we are planning, and we will have 3 facilities. So generally, first is in April, second is planned to start operating in May, and the third in June. So as it was mentioned in last presentation, theoretical production volume of those 3 facilities is 63,000 megawatts of biomethane. It's complicated calculation. So it's biomethane is calculated in energy megawatts, but that's like alternative how much biomethane can be produced in those facilities. And we still continue our testing and development of specialized feed technology. To continue with this information, I fully understand that investors, are waiting for quite long time already for more information about commercialization of those projects. How those projects will be developed and how they will be implemented. So what I can say today that group is really working on the plan how, first of all, these technologies we created will be used in AUGA operations, and how these technologies can be used in agriculture in general. And secondly, what impact, financial impact from those changes will be on AUGA financial statements. So obviously, we still need to finalize the plan. We need to make a decision. And when the decision will be made, of course, all this information will be provided to the investors. My guess is that in the second quarter of this year, we will be able to come up and provide more information and more detailed information on those plans we are currently working on. And as always, it's just information about our share performance, 3 companies which are following us. And here you can always find more detailed information, financial reports, numbers in Excel format, and so on. So that was the presentation, and I believe now we can move to the questions.
Indeed. So thank you very much for the presentation. And as we're moving for the Q&A session, I would like to remind all attendees that you can send in your questions in the Q&A box of your screen. So let's begin with the first question, which is as following. How do you see your debt structure and debt portfolio? Are you preparing a plan how to refinance bonds? How you see refinancing risks and prices in bond market?
Thank you for the question. Maybe it's just 2 parts of the question regarding our debt portfolio. I think we obviously are aware that if we talk about leverage of the group, so it is on the higher end. And I think it was already mentioned by the company, by the management of the company, that if we talk about commercialization of those new technologies, so we fully understand and we don't plan that all those investments will be financed by additional borrowing. First of all, we believe that this will not be needed, but we also need to understand and find a way how to do it in much better way for the company. So we are, and this part of the plan I was mentioning, we are working on the ways how to attract additional investments, and we are working on ideas how to do that and how to structure that in order to have structure in place and possibilities for those who would be interested in such investment to do this. So that is the reason why we are changing and our legal structure of the group, it was already mentioned in some public announcement we did a couple of months ago. So generally, we are trying to make our structure more transparent. We want to separate different business units and business activities. So all technological activities of the group, they are already concentrated in the new company, AUGA Tech. So this would be the way how we can make those investments without creating additional risks in terms of increasing leverage even further. Second part of the question, if we talk about the bonds, we still have 1.5 year to go before refinancement or end of the current bond program. So, of course, maybe it's very difficult to predict what would be the situation and how the market react. But we believe that we still have quite an attractive offer for current bondholders, because in terms of pricing, in terms of securitization, in terms of activity of the company, so we believe that this is attractive offer for the investors, and we also doing some homework to prepare for this moment as well. And the same structural changes is also one of the reasons why we are doing, because we believe that if we have more transparent structure, we can show to the investors results of different activities. So if we talk about dairy business, if we talk about crop growing business, if we talk about land management business, so this will create additional benefit and will give better opinion from potential investors. Secondly, I think, which is also a very important factor for us, if we talk about refinancing of bonds, so then if we look at investors of our bonds, so generally, I would say absolute majority of our investors came from Baltic countries. And I think that's why we don't have the risk that if you have investors from the markets, which generally are not that active in the Baltic market anymore. So, local investors invested or provided financing for AUGA Group, and we believe that, this demand will be there as well next year if we will have to do the refinancing.
Thank you very much for your answer. How do you see group's liquidity position?
Okay, it's like very, very generic question, and it's very difficult to answer, because I think every company could answer that liquidity position always could be better. But on the serious side, I think we had very similar question during the last presentation we had. And maybe I will just repeat my answer. But first of all, agriculture is really requires a lot of working capital, and organic agriculture, it requires even more, because generally our business cycle takes almost 2 years. For 1 year we are growing everything, for the second year we are selling everything, because we don't sell to the traders, but we have to sell to final consumers. So generally we have to store, we have to deliver, and so on. So of course, working capital and liquidity is always very important factor, and it's always area we need to focus and manage. And in the last couple of years, first of all, with our poor financial results, and secondly, with increase of costs, this area, I can't say it become even more important, because it always was, but this is always area we need to focus and work on. So generally, with our resources, with our suppliers, which also provide some financing to all agricultural entities, at least in Lithuania, financial partners. So we we are working on that. So I think that could be the answer to this question.
Thank you very much. Let's move on. What is the strategy of going forward in terms of eco-farming? Group had strong results only because of favorable commodity prices, and usually performance is weak.
Okay, thank you once again for the question. If we talk about the strategy, I would maybe ask for a little bit more patience. As I said, I understand that every time I'm meeting some of the investors, they are always happy to talk about, our view on organic farming, on those technological developments, but everyone is asking, could you give us more figures? What you're planning to do with the tractors, how much you will learn from that, etc. Et so as I said, in the second quarter of this year, detailed plan should be presented, and I think this plan will give the best answer to the strategy going forward.
Thank you very much. Looking at upcoming harvest and falling wheat prices, how do you see the upcoming crop results?
It was already discussed during the presentation, so maybe I'll just very briefly to repeat myself that first of all, it's quite difficult to predict what would be actual prices when there will be new harvest in place. And then we will have the biggest impact on our financial results. So definitely current situation when the prices are decreasing is not like the positive one. But I would say, first of all, there are too much uncertainty to make predictions. Secondly, we still believe that if we will have this drop, and we already having this drop in prices, so our prediction is that we still will be on quite a higher level in terms of prices we were a couple of years ago.
Thank you very much. What exactly pushes, I'm sorry, just a second. Okay, what exactly pushes down the prices of raw milk in the Baltics? The news seemed to be quite dramatic regarding the dairy farmer profitability.
I wouldn't say that this is some exceptional situation in the Baltics only. So generally, we see a similar trend in Germany, for example, as well, in other European countries, Poland. Generally, if we talk about the prices, answer is very obvious. Demand is lower than the supply, and that's how this current situation is. Maybe it will be very difficult for me to go into very details and explain how the whole dairy market works, but overall, currently we have oversupply in production. It's just a question, is it very temporary situation? How the situation will change in the summer when cows will leave farms, and usually and historically there is a seasonality when milk production increases. But it also depends on the situation in the market because Baltic countries are really, I would say, our dairy producers, and I mean processing companies, they are working not in the local market only, they are exporting quite substantial part of their production. So generally the situation in the export market improves. So then we could expect improvement in production of raw milk industry as well.
Thank you very much. As I see that we have 3 questions remaining, I would like to remind all the attendees that you can send in your questions in the question box of your screen, and I will voice them out. So the next question would be as following. In Q4, the interest expense decreased by more than 50% year on year. Could you please give reasons behind this decrease?
Okay, it's a little bit technical thing, and it's obvious that maybe we had to provide a little bit more information in our annual reports, and we definitely will do that in our audit reports. So generally, our interest expenses, they consist from several parts. So it's like normal interest expenses, what we are paying to financial institutions. So where no decrease in this line if we compare year on year. So I would say even it's different situation. Generally, we are paying more interest to the financial institutions just because of higher interest base. There is IFRS 16 effect. So generally, you have interest for your rent assets, and this one was also had the same interest what we had previously. But at the end of the year, we also do some remodeling of our IFRS 16 obligations. So that's where this, let's say, positive impact came from, which decreased our interests just if you look at the overall figure. But if we divide it into the parts, so generally we have this, we don't have this decrease as it was mentioned in the question. And this change, remodeling of liabilities is generally done at the end of every year. And as I mentioned maybe during the presentation, that some of the models we did at the end of the year last year, we had some substantial effects just because of this quite extraordinary year we had and all those changes in our cost level, interest level. So this also had an effect on financial results as well. Mm-hmm. So hopefully this answers the question.
Thank you very much. Other cash crop yield was much lower than forecasted. Could you please explain why?
The biggest reason that we tried some new projects with some new crops, and I would say that our expectation and forecast was, as mentioned in the question, was much higher than the actual results. So this could be for several reasons. First of all, it's a new projects we are doing and new cultures we are growing. So maybe we don't have that much experience and knowledge about that. Secondly, maybe just because of some weather conditions, the harvest was lower than forecasted. But just because of lower yields because of the weather, so that could be another argument. So it's difficult to say because, as I said, it's quite new projects and we don't have history to make a full clear judgment was of the reason behind the lower than forecasted results.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
To elaborate on higher costs, I think I already mentioned during the presentation what has changed if we check figures in the Q3 report and an annual report. So I think that was all the answer.
Thank you very much. Could you please elaborate on 38% higher cost per hectare for wheat?
Okay, but I mentioned this already. So I think this was already discussed during the presentation. So.
Okay, thank you very much. And it seems that we have the last question for today, which is, what are the main challenges for the year 2023?
Okay, it's the last question, but not the easiest one. I think, there are lots of challenges. Of course, there are lots of opportunities. So if we talk about challenges, of course, those latest developments in the market in terms of price, there is one area we really need to follow and react. because of course high prices last year was really were really helping us to improve our results. So this is one area to follow and to react, as I said, in terms of what we are doing, our cost level, and so on and so on. Secondly, if we talk about mushroom business, I really think that for the last couple of years we had those continuing challenges in our production processes. So this is really, and I really hope that this will be the year when we will manage to solve them finally and get back the company to the level of profitability the company was operating for many years historically. I would say I'm quite optimistic about our potential for growth in FMCG business. Because we are expanding our customer number. As I said, we are entering new markets. We are increasing our product portfolio. So this could give us some optimism for the future. And if we talk about the challenges, because the question was about the challenges, I think that those technological developments we were doing, tractors, biogas, this from one side is really the thing which will require additional, resources to really start commercializing. But from another side, this also gives us opportunities as well, because as I said in the very beginning of the presentation, for 2022 we didn't have any impact from those research and development activities we were doing for the last couple of years, and I really hope that in 2023 finally we will at least have something to show, and something to show not only what we did but also show in our financial reports. So I'm sure that this year we will have, okay, it's minor effect, but free tractors. Okay, if we even don't talk about further development, free tractors you can use in your activity, so you are decreasing some maybe costs in rent of tractors from third parties. But more importantly, our biogas facilities, they will start generate biogas in the second quarter of this year, and we already in talks to sell this gas to the consumers. So this will have positive impact on our results, and we could be another positive effect that there is no market of green gas in Lithuania, but then there will be a supply. We really believe that this will create the market, and this could be additional earning opportunity for AUGA Group, green certificates of gas as well. And even if we talk about our core business, agricultural business, this biogas facilities could have a positive impact on our agricultural business, because we are using the same fertilizers, manures, but they will be produced and we will have it in liquid form, digestate. So generally, theoretically, this could give better results in terms of fertilization and better output for our crop growing operations as well. So, I started from few challenges, and of course there are quite a few of them, but we also see some opportunities for 2023 as well.
Thank you very much on this last comment. And as all the questions are answered, on behalf of AUGA Group and Nasdaq Vilnius, thank you everyone for joining us today. Dear management, thank you very much for the presentation and the Q&A session. As always, the recording will be available in the Nasdaq Baltic YouTube channel. Have a good evening, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you.